So welcome. We're just doing a little Facebook Live right now. Welcome to Greece. We have to do that again. The whole time if possible. Give them a wave. So we're just gathering here for the first few moments to just to begin the conversation about what it is we're doing here, okay? How it is that we all came to be gathered in this place in Athens at this particular time. I do want to share with you that it is the most auspicious moment in time where there are particular energies intersecting at exactly our start time of this tour. Not because I planned it that way, but just because there's always a wave of grace that happens to be carrying us exactly where we're going and when we get there. And that is the case as well. I don't know if anyone, did Sue explain that to you on the tour this morning? Come up here, Sue. Okay. Some of you have met her. We are so thrilled to have our tour guide, and Nikki is here also. And we're helping us with this amazing guided tour through Greece. So, do you want to share just a little bit about?
As I explained on the coach, I am an astrologer, that's my background. And I watch the ley lines of the land too, and the energy system that we all connect into. We connect to the cosmos and the earth, those are all. And in Greece, the two major lines are Pallas Athena and Apollo. And we will be crossing those points in many of the sites that we go to, which we'll talk about. But when I ran up the chart at 4:30 in Greece this afternoon, Pallas Athena and Apollo are right overhead.
A very rare and auspicious again. Okay. Thank you so much. We'll be hearing from the two of them throughout our time together, but I just had to share with you that when she, we were meeting yesterday about our tour, and she said, well, it happens to be that exactly your start time is exactly when the most potent energies are here. So, our work is about bridging the worlds of light and ultimately love in the body. And we are bridging the idea that consciousness is light, and we're always traveling to sacred sites around the world to study the culture's interpretations of exactly that. Whether it is ancient Egypt and going up the Nile to the Great Pyramids, or whether it is the South American and Andean spirituality, or in North and South India and Hinduism, the various aspects of the gods and goddesses are always showing us cultural interpretations of high-frequency truth, pure consciousness, as it comes into form. Deities, gods, and goddesses are formulated in the history of every culture around the world as an attempt to explain in story form what it is that is happening in the journey upward, ultimately. We are studying in this coursework enlightenment and embodiment. And so I'm always translating for you when we come across the various deities and what they represented and what they brought to the villages or to the peoples, etc., the powers or the superpowers that they possessed. I'm always overlaying that into the human physiology, because every god and goddess and every historical translation of them is ultimately also a representation holographically of the human system, of consciousness folded over on itself, and how we are the walking gods and goddesses that we study about in Greek mythology, in ancient Hinduism, etc. Across the globe, this has always been true and will always be a great adventure of ours to uncover the mystery and allow it to become less mysterious, so that we ultimately come into contact with the truth of our true nature and our capacity, not only as beings of light, but while we're being human. When we understand this greater perspective, we can start to live life from an entirely different place, from an entirely different vantage point. The flying up of the consciousness that is represented by a great bird in every culture, of course, is represented with Athena as well as Isis in Egypt, and as well as the dove of hope in Christianity, and so forth. There is always a winged one associated with what we're doing. The owl, of course, is associated with Athena, and we'll be studying about some aspects of of each of these gods and goddesses as we traverse through our tour. What I want you to get is that why we come together is to remember who we are. Why we come to the sacred sites that we do is to be facilitated by this great joining and merging of various energies at these different sacred sites. The sacred sites became sacred sites not because we just decided to build a temple in a certain place and then people came to the temple and made it sacred. The temples were built where the energies were emitting from the earth in rare form, in pure form, in potent form. The temples were built on top of these sites all across Europe, all across Asia, all across South America, all across North America, and so on. And so what we want to realize is that we're going to the sacred sites because of the energies that are present there. And the work that we do, which is to build the circuitry to perceive ourselves as the gods and goddesses, as the great creative energy that we truly are, we're building the circuitry to be able to perceive that, and that is facilitated when we come to these sacred sites. JourneyAwake was developed because of that, because we happen to be finding ourselves just going all over the world and being in these amazing places. And so we started creating a systematic approach to that. It became obvious to me that déjà vus were happening for people in large form, in all kinds of ways, at all kinds of different destinations. People were having awakenings and all kinds of experiences. And I know that those experiences were greatly enhanced because of the ground that we were standing on and the conversation that we were having at the same time. So you will be experiencing déjà vus, you will have great memories, you may have a shaking or quivering or weak at the knees kind of feeling. You may have a sense of illumination, a sense of remembrance. You may find yourself in the descriptions of the gods and the goddesses that we are studying. And I would love for you to allow yourself to invite that to actually be true. Not just some mysterious coincidence that might be occurring just because you're all caught up in some emotional state. It isn't that. Please allow your imagination to be an alive part of who you are, because it was thrown under the bus when you were about 4 years old and somebody said, oh, that's just your imagination. We discarded that quality of our own consciousness in that moment and have been compromised ever since. So now we return once again as a JourneyAwake to the places where the cellular structure is being activated. The DNA within your own cellular structure is being turned on or redirected or even squelched because of a greater truth that you'll be exploring in our time together. And as that begins to happen, we get to be the living, breathing example of what science is now showing us is true. That we are made of pure creative energy. It cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed. Thereby, we are scientifically proven to be spiritual beings, meaning we're made of that essence that cannot be created or destroyed. So science is finally saying it's smart to be spiritual, which is a rare moment in time. So with quantum science coming onto the picture and bridging these worlds for us, and epigenetics revealing to us that the little antennas on the surface of your cells that are picking up a message from the environment and then deciding to or translating that message into the cell, and the cell then produces chemicals or behaves in a way based upon the reality that we are allowing it to swim in because we've loosened our mind. We've opened ourselves to a greater possibility. We're allowing more types of energies, more qualities, different kinds of characteristics of our mind field are now having an opportunity to become alive again. And as that happens, we start to turn on our cells and our DNA structure in a different way than it's been turned on in our entire lifetime, or the lifetimes of our parents and their parents and their parents, for that matter. And so as we're stepping into this greater realm of possibility, the invitation is this: can you, will you, become the very energy that conquers Medusa? We're going to talk about that. Can you, will you allow yourself to be the given, empowered with the superhuman powers or the godlike powers of the many gods and goddesses in Greek mythology that we studied as something from long ago, a mythological realm of stories where there were so many sons and daughters nobody could keep track of who was married to who and how it all came to be. Turns out that's the truth every civilization. Hinduism has the same complexity, all because it doesn't follow the linear path that we're used to thinking in. So I'm hoping to open your minds, or to facilitate the opening of your mind, along with our amazing tour guides, to allow for a different environment for yourselves to be swimming in, because your mind opens and you allow something to be true for you that was not taught to you as you were developing up to these moments in time in our lives. And as we allow and embrace a greater version of ourselves, there is no choice but for your own DNA to respond in kind. And the next thing you know, you can see right through something that used to get a hold of you. And as you see right through it, you simply open and allow a new realm to step into your reality. You see where you used to get hooked in, where you used to be attached, or where you used to be addicted, or you used to be perceiving that this was the only choice that you had. You see right through it, right in real-time moments, and you simply release that reality and expand into a larger one. This is the point of all of the work that we're doing in the course of our lives. It's the point of every healing retreat that we do. It's the point of every coursework conversation that we have. It's the point of every adventure in the course of your life that you have been through up until this moment in time. Every single thing has been an assertion for you, either consciously or subconsciously, to put yourself in the environment where you could continue to birth into the full expression of who and what you are. And it transcends the descriptions that we were given in school. It transcends the conversation that has been happening in our spiritual conversations and communities. It transcends what science taught us as we were developing our own ability to navigate through life the way that science and logistics and linear thinking would have us do, even effectively, even with the best of our intentions in mind, with the highest good in mind for us. Our teachers didn't know, and their teachers didn't know. And we've been passed along in a realm of conversations that have been limiting our experience of who we truly are. It's time for us to rewrite what spirituality means. It is time for us to rewrite what human potential means. It's time for us to write new songs and new poetry. It is time for us to recognize that we are actually leaders, that we are actually creators of the entire experience that we are having. Without exception, we are creating it. And if we are bumping up against something that is so friction-based, that is so painful, there's a reason for it. It's polishing you, and it's going to grind it down and refine it down until we can truly see the great benefit in every single thing that we're experiencing. Science is showing us that the conversation of love has been more pervasive, more important, more significant, I should say, than any other conversation we've ever been in. That the conversation of love is being scientifically proven to be smart to engage in. Is fascinating to me. And I'm extraordinarily thrilled that we get to engage in such an exploration of that on foot through the sacred sites of ancient Greece. Because if you think of Greece in terms of ancient Lemuria plus ancient Egypt, you follow? And if you took Egypt and added, just doused it in a bucket of femininity, all right? What's going to happen is you're going to be in the presence of the most powerful masculine and feminine energies combined. I see Greece as exactly that. That we are steeped in the birthing of consciousness which occurred in ancient Egypt. How many of you were in Egypt with us? Mm-hmm. Awesome. So if you think of it in the terms of ancient Egypt and the dawning of consciousness, the development of a species that could become self-aware happened in Egypt. And then this intelligence, this awareness, moved across the land to India for further development and moved across the sea to where you sit right now in ancient Greece. And so there are different qualities of the interpretation of that. The development and the refinement of it showed up as Greek mythology. The development and refinement of that in another form showed up as ancient Hinduism. And so we are seated at a place where we have an equal opportunity to, an empowered opportunity to take that refinement and allow it to become ours on a physiological level. Just as I've shared with you that Saraswati was the corpus callosum in the human physiology, and just as I've shared with you that Shiva is representing the void of the bone, and that Brahma is the creator force in the physiology and the use of our own creativity above the primitive brain, we're going to be exploring the gods and goddesses of ancient Greece in kind. That the instruments that they used for the powers that they demonstrated are actually also found inside the human physiology. And that all of it is a story about you. That this entire journey is going to be a reminder, an awakening of aspects of your own consciousness that you have perhaps held as something separate from you, given the way that we were raised, given the belief systems and the conversations that we were raised in. So, if for no other amount of time, I would invite you in the next 11 days to open your mind and allow your heart to flow with a great fluidity that perhaps it has never known. Be in the adventure, and every single time that you hear a conversation about the places that we're standing and the events that took place and what was represented from one of the gods or the goddesses at that time, that you for just a moment allow it to be a representation of a part of you that maybe your high school teacher or your college professor didn't tend to weave together for you in that moment. And so therefore, the study of Greek mythology was something over here on a shelf in some books or in some movies or in some stories that we have shared or heard or read about. And once again, we leave ourselves as not integrated, not a part of what it is that we're studying, but rather allowing us to be separate from this amazing grace that was bestowed upon these other beings or people long, long ago. You know, when I had this awakening and recognized that my number one desire was to be able to have access to that state at will, and I couldn't ever do it when I was trying to get there. And when I would stop trying, things would start to repeat. Things would start to I would start to gain access to these high states of consciousness again. And so I put two and two together over, about 10 years. True. And as those pieces started to come together, I developed a system that was allowing me to have an entirely different life experience. And then I started sharing that system with other people. And along the way, I met you fine folks, right? This is how this is all happening. And so in the midst of that, I began noticing that my body, and some of you know this story about body awake yoga and how it originated. I would wake up in the middle of the night and my body would be in sacred geometries, geometrical shapes that I had never put it in before. In fact, I couldn't put it in those shapes when I would try to describe to people what was happening for me in the middle of the night. The next morning, the next day, I would go to the clinic and I'd be talking to Dr. Cooper or talking to the staff or talking to some patient that had become a friend along the way. And I tried to show them the position that I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and find my body in this position, and there was no way that I could get it back in that position because I was running on a different set of circuits at that point, but I didn't understand that that was the reason why. And so I began teaching some of these yoga positions and the sacred geometries that are associated with them in my coursework. And the reason for that was I knew that every time my body was in those positions, energy was starting to run differently through my body. And as I was noticing that energy was running differently through my body, I also noticed that I could think and perceive and interpret information differently as well. And so it became obvious to me that it's a significant aspect of what we're doing, to put our bodies in these sacred geometries or some semblance of them, whatever degree we can approach such positions, the yoga asanas, became valued. So then someone recognized that I was doing that, came to one of my workshops, happened to live in the city that I lived in, showed up at a yoga studio that I go to, and I was taking a yoga class. She said from across the room, a group about this size, your yoga class was amazing yesterday. So of course 3 or 4 other people in the group say, you teach yoga? And I was like, no, yes, I don't know, maybe, follow? So then I decided that if I'm going to be teaching yoga, I need to go and learn yoga. so that I can be respectful to the yoga industry, right? To the people and the teachers of yoga. And so as part of the assignment of becoming this yoga instructor was to read the Upanishads and the Yoga Sutras, etc. And as I dove into that, and this is relevant to what we're doing here in this way, as I dove into that, I recognized that the things that were in these sacred texts were the same things that I had come up with on my own in order to reproduce these exalted experiences that I was having in meditation and in these exalted states of my own. And so I recognized in that moment that these sacred texts that are sitting on the shelf are not representative of something from long ago. Thousands of years ago they were written, but they don't belong on the shelf. They are alive and well inside of you, inside of your own physiology, the workings that you are made of, the ways that you synapse and interpret energies, the way that you evaluate those energies and assign symbolism to them, the images and then therefore the words that come forward for you in your thoughts and your interpretations of life are a byproduct of your own interconnectedness and your own ability to perceive that you are a cosmic being, meaning you are made of pure awareness, which is non-local, and you have created a single focal point for yourself in this body, as this body. And so you will see about a goddess who develops a musical instrument, but is known to have never played it. And the reason is because she was the instrument. But that got lost in translation in the writings, and as so many other things. You follow? So we're headed into the unpacking of these mythological stories because they are you. They are you, not just conceptually, not just symbolically, not just theoretically, but also physically. That your physiology is inside the stories of these gods and goddesses, and it is imperative that we embrace that, because it is time for us to remember the truth of who we are. And as we do, we too will realize that the things that we find ourselves reading about, that the things that we find ourselves studying and drawn to, we are studying and drawn to because it is the rest of our story. It is the rest of who we are. That's why the infatuation. That's why seated here in this room together. That's why plugging in as part of our community in these moments that we begin to explore and begin to reanimate the full potential that we are as beings of consciousness, never created, never destroyed, eternal beings that are back again, I feel this time, to remember a greater version of the truth than we ever have before. Dig? Sweet. So we're going to see you guys later.